She thought no one could stop her. Isabella Moore, 35 years old, polished, powerful, and proudly untouchable, stepped onto the grounds of Buckingham Palace like it was her personal runway. With every step in her $9.00 heels, she looked down on the crowd, confident that her status would bend even the strictest rules. But in less than 5 minutes, she would do something reckless, and what followed silenced an entire crowd. You're watching Guard Royals, Stories Real Honor. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Tap subscribe if you believe respect still matters. Back to Isabella, she wasn't there for the history or the beauty. She was there to be seen, and when a royal guard didn't acknowledge her presence, that's when everything started to unravel. What began as arrogance quickly escalated into confrontation. But what she didn't realize was that this guard wasn't just standing still. He was standing for something bigger. And when she pulled a weapon, yes, a real stun gun, everything changed. Stick with us until the end, because this isn't just a story about disrespect. It's about duty. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why silence can speak louder than any scream. Isabella didn't like being ignored. And when the royal guard refused to flinch, speak, or even blink in her direction, something inside her snapped. You think standing there makes you better than me? She scoffed, her voice cutting through the chilly morning air. I've fired executives for less than this. She stepped closer, invading his space, heels clicking against the ancient stone like warning shots. Tourists nearby began shifting uncomfortably. Some pulled out their phones, others simply moved their children out of the way. They could sense something was off. Isabella wasn't just irritated, she was insulted. I'm speaking to you, she said, louder, now just inches from his face. Do you know who I am? Still, the guard remained motionless. Eyes forward, spine straight. That's when she pulled out her phone, holding it high like a weapon of influence. I have the head of security on speed dial. You'll be scrubbing floors before noon. But it wasn't enough. The silence, the complete lack of acknowledgement was too much for someone like Isabella, who thrived on control. She felt powerless, and that terrified her. The more he stood still, the more unhinged she became. You're hiding behind tradition, behind a uniform, but let's see what happens when the rules don't protect you anymore. Her voice was rising, her tone sharp. Her words, crafted from years of boardroom battles, were now aimed at a man sworn to never react. And in that moment, something darker took hold. She reached into her bag again, not for her phone, but for something far more dangerous. The moment her fingers wrapped around the cold metal grip, Isabella knew she had crossed a line. But she didn't care. Her anger, her ego, her hunger to be acknowledged had reached a boiling point. She pulled out a high-voltage stun gun disguised as a sleek designer accessory. The sight of it in her hand made nearby tourists gasp. Parents pulled children close. An elderly man stepped forward, his instincts sharper than most. He had seen this kind of escalation before, not in front of a palace, but in combat zones. I suggest you put that down, ma'am, he said firmly. Isabella barely glanced at him. Back off, Grandpa. You have no idea who you're talking to. The guard, Oliver Grant, remained still. His training ran deep. His discipline had been carved from real war zones, deserts, forests, cities torn by conflict. He'd stared down enemies with weapons far worse than this. But still, this felt different. Personal. You've got one chance, Isabella hissed, holding the stun gun just inches from his chest. Acknowledge me or I swear. Zest. The sharp crackle of electricity pierced the air as she pressed the device directly against his ceremonial jacket. Sparks flew, a flash of blue-white light. His body seized briefly, shoulders tightening, jaw clenching. But he didn't fall. The stun gun buzzed violently, and for a moment, Isabella's face twisted into a smirk. She thought she'd won. But then, his eyes opened. What she saw, it wasn't rage. It was willpower, unshakable, iron-bound resolve. His boots stayed planted, his spine straightened, and slowly, deliberately, his gloved hand reached out and gripped her wrist with the control of a man who'd been trained to neutralize threats without unnecessary harm. The stun gun dropped to the ground. Smoke curled up from its metal prongs. Isabella gasped, not from pain, but from disbelief. "You assaulted a member of the Royal Guard," he said quietly. His voice was calm, unshaken, but it held the weight of 1,000 battle cries, the kind that echoed through history books and memorial walls. People around them stood frozen. Some had tears in their eyes. Others had dropped their phones in shock. The elderly veteran stepped closer. "She used a weapon against a soldier doing his duty." Security guards were already moving in. One of them spoke into a radio. Another unhooked handcuffs from his belt. But Oliver hadn't let go yet. His grip wasn't cruel, but it was final. It said, "Enough." Isabella tried to wriggle free. "You can't do this. I'll sue every last one of you." Oliver looked into her eyes, and for the first time she saw it, not fear, not anger, but disappointment. "I've buried friends who died defending this uniform," he said. "And today you mocked it. You tried to break it." And in that second, something inside Isabella cracked, not from pain, but from realization. She looked around and saw faces filled with respect, not for her, but for him. She wasn't the center anymore, and for the first time in her life she felt truly powerless. The crowd had gone silent. No more gasps. No more phones held high. Just stillness, thick and heavy. As Isabella stood locked in the grip of a man she had just tried to humiliate. Her perfectly manicured nails dug into her palm, but it wasn't pain she was feeling. It was exposure, the kind that stripped away image and left truth behind. Her expensive coat was now crumpled at the collar. Strands of hair clung to her lip gloss. Her voice, once sharp and commanding, trembled slightly, not because of fear of the stun gun's consequences, but because something deeper had cracked. "You think this matters?" she hissed, half to herself, half to the crowd. "I know people. I can end careers." "You tried to end mine," Oliver replied quietly. "With lies. With power you didn't earn." He still hadn't let go, but it wasn't about restraint anymore. It was about confrontation, of values, of character, of the masks people wear when they think no one will stop them. An officer approached cautiously. "Sir, we'll take it from here." But Oliver's eyes stayed on Isabella. "What's your name?" She blinked. "Why?" "Because I want to remember it," he said. "As the day someone mistook silence for weakness and discovered the opposite." Isabella's jaw tightened, but something in her eyes flickered. She looked around and realized no one was on her side. The crowd, once passive, now looked at her like a child who'd ruined something sacred. And then, the elderly veteran stepped forward. His voice was soft, but each word landed like stone. "I served in the Falklands. Lost my best friend to a sniper's bullet. You know what he was doing when he died? Standing still, just like him." He nodded at Oliver, guarding something bigger than himself. "And now, decades later, you come here with your money, your threats, your weapon, and attack that same symbol, all because you weren't acknowledged?" Isabella's lips parted to reply, but no sound came out. "I've spent my whole life teaching my grandkids that respect is earned, not demanded," he continued. "But I never thought I'd see a grown woman act like a child, with a weapon in her hand." The words hit her harder than any legal consequence could. Her shoulders dropped. She looked down at the stun gun, now lifeless on the ground, smoke gone, threat neutralized. That's when she felt it, the ache of humiliation. Not because she lost, but because she was wrong. For the first time in her adult life, Isabella wasn't in control. Her name, her contacts, her prestige, none of it mattered here. This man, standing tall despite the pain she caused him, represented something she couldn't touch. Oliver finally released her wrist. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, still, as security moved in with handcuffs. Before they reached her, she turned toward Oliver, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," he interrupted gently, "and that's what makes it worse." And as they led her away, every click of her heels echoed across the palace courtyard, not as a symbol of power, but of a fall. As the officers led Isabella away, something shifted, not just in her, but in everyone watching. What had started as a tourist's tantrum had turned into a lesson about power, restraint, and the quiet weight of responsibility. Oliver Grant didn't return to his exact stance right away. He bent down, picked up the fallen stun gun, and handed it to the approaching security chief without a word. His gloved fingers showed a faint tremor, barely noticeable but very real. Not from fear, from pain. "You all right, son?" the elderly veteran asked gently. Oliver gave a faint nod. 8 years in the military. Took worse than that. But the old man wasn't just asking about the shock. He was asking about the insult. And yet, Oliver didn't flinch. Instead, he returned to his post, feet together, back straight, rifle in position. The silence around the courtyard was thick. No more camera clicks, no whispering, just a collective awareness that they had witnessed something rare, something noble. A woman in her 70s slowly approached him, hand over her heart. "My husband served," she whispered. "He would have been proud of you." Oliver didn't reply, but the faintest nod acknowledged her words. And then, something unexpected happened. A palace official stepped through the gates. Unlike the security team, this man wore a suit with a royal crest pinned to his jacket. He spoke directly to Oliver, but loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I've just spoken with His Majesty's aide. They saw the incident on surveillance." Oliver turned slightly, just enough to acknowledge he was listening. "They were impressed, not just with your restraint, but with your integrity." The official pulled out a folded envelope and handed it over. "You're being considered for the Cross of Service, for valor in civilian protection." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A medal like that wasn't given out lightly. Oliver's jaw tightened, not from pride, but from the weight of what it meant. He didn't do what he did for recognition. He stood his ground because it was right. But the fact that others saw it, that the moment mattered beyond just a viral clip, meant something. The elderly veteran stepped beside the palace official. "You've done more today than just protect the palace," he said. "You reminded all of us that real strength doesn't scream, it stands. It endures." And then, without prompting, the crowd began to clap. Slow at first, then steady. It wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. It was respectful, measured. A tribute, not just to the man, but to what he represented. As the applause grew, Oliver didn't smile, he didn't wave, but something in his eyes softened, a quiet kind of gratitude. Because in that moment, amidst the sound of hands meeting in admiration, a new opportunity was born, not just for Oliver, but for the tradition he embodied. In a world racing toward noise, flash, and instant gratification, he had reminded them of something older, something deeper, dignity. And for the first time in a long while, people weren't just watching a guard in red. They were seeing the man inside the uniform. Back in the palace's security annex, away from the crowd and cameras, Oliver Grant sat quietly on a wooden bench, the adrenaline slowly fading from his system. His hands still tingled from the electricity. His jaw ached from keeping it clenched through the pain. But what weighed most wasn't physical. It was the memory of the look in Isabella's eyes, not the arrogance, but that flicker of something else. Doubt, shame, humanity. The door creaked open. A junior guard peeked in, wide-eyed. "Sir, I just wanted to say, you handled that better than I think I ever could have." Oliver looked up. "That's not what training teaches you." "No, sir, that's something deeper." The words stuck with him. Meanwhile, in the back of a security vehicle, Isabella Moore sat in stunned silence, far different from the woman who had once barked threats and flaunted power like a purse. Her phone buzzed. Over and over, emails, missed calls, media alerts. One headline caught her eye. CEO's assistant uses stun gun on royal guard. Crowd outraged. Her throat went dry. This wasn't just going to ruin her career. This might define her legacy. But for the first time, she didn't reach for a lawyer, or a contact, or a press statement. Instead, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out nothing, because she had nothing left to shield herself with. Back at the palace, Oliver was quietly released from duty for the day. He didn't protest. As he exited the back gate, the veteran from earlier was waiting, leaning on his cane, watching the gray sky. "Didn't want to leave without saying thank you," the old man said. "You don't need to thank me, sir," Oliver replied. "It's just the job." The man nodded slowly. "Maybe, but how you do the job, that's where the difference lies." He paused. "Do you know what struck me most today? It wasn't the silence. It was your restraint. I saw boys in war who could shoot a rifle without blinking but couldn't hold back their pride. You did." Oliver looked out over the empty courtyard. "I wasn't trying to prove anything." "That's exactly why it mattered," the old man said with a smile. 3 days later, Oliver received a letter. Not from the palace, but handwritten. The envelope had no return address, just his name in elegant cursive. Inside was a simple note. "You had every right to retaliate. You chose dignity instead. You didn't just guard the palace. You guarded something I forgot existed. I'm sorry." "I am Isabella Moore." He stared at the signature for a long time, not out of anger, not even forgiveness, but respect. Because real growth doesn't happen under applause. It happens alone, quietly, when no one's watching. And maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to understand that too. A week had passed. The incident at Buckingham Palace had become global news. Talk shows debated it. Commentators dissected it. Social media, of course, had its usual extremes. Some defending Isabella, most condemning her. But beyond the headlines, beyond the noise, something more meaningful had begun to take root. People weren't just talking about the woman with the stun gun, they were talking about the man who didn't flinch. Oliver Grant, the silent guard, had become a symbol, not just of strength, but of something America's older generation recognized instinctively: composure under pressure, grace under fire. The kind of honor you don't see much anymore. He hadn't posted about it, didn't tweet, didn't give interviews. In fact, he remained where he always had, quietly doing his job, one shift at a time. But the ripple effect was undeniable. Veterans groups sent letters, schools requested him for talks. A retired Marine from Ohio sent a hand-carved plaque engraved with, "True power needs no words." And yet, Oliver remained humble. As one morning, as frost lingered in the air, a tour bus pulled up. Among the visitors stepping off was a woman in a long gray coat, hair tied back, makeup simple. Isabella Moore. She kept her distance. No press, no entourage, just her. She stood in silence at the edge of the courtyard, eyes fixed on the palace. The guards changed formation. Oliver was not on duty that day, but his presence was still felt. One of the younger guards stood just like him, still, focused, unshakable. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. He was no longer there to be noticed. She was there to notice. Later that afternoon, in a modest cafe off the mall, Oliver sipped black tea and glanced through the window. A small boy in a tourist hoodie stood outside, mimicking the royal guard's posture. His grandfather smiled proudly beside him. Oliver smiled too. That was the true reward, not medals or letters, but the quiet understanding that his actions had inspired something lasting, something future generations could learn from. That evening, back in his modest flat, he opened the envelope again. Isabella's note. He placed it inside a drawer next to his father's old war medals, not out of pride, but as a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won with force, but with restraint. And as the sun dipped below the London skyline, painting the sky in quiet gold, Oliver sat back and allowed himself a moment of peace. Because in a world constantly shouting, he had proven that silence, when rooted in purpose, can shake the ground louder than any scream. Let's pause for a moment. Put yourself in Oliver Grant's shoes. You're standing guard outside Buckingham Palace. It's cold. You've been motionless for hours. Tourists are snapping photos, children are laughing, and most people pass by without a second thought. Then, someone steps forward. They don't just interrupt your duty, they insult it. They get in your face, accuse you of things you didn't do, threaten your career, and eventually, they raise a weapon, a real one, a stun gun aimed right at your chest. And still, you say nothing. Now, let me ask you, what would you have done? Would you have snapped? Would you have raised your voice? Would you have defended yourself physically or retaliated out of pride? Most people, even the calmest among us, might have cracked, and no one would have blamed them. But Oliver didn't. He stayed still, focused, controlled, not out of fear, but out of something much deeper. Discipline, duty, and above all, dignity. When we're younger, we often think strength is loud. It's shouting the last word in an argument. It's making people fear you. It's showing power through action. But the older we get, the more we learn that true strength is quiet. It's holding your ground when everything in you wants to strike back. It's protecting your values even when someone tries to drag you down. It's knowing who you are and not letting someone else define you, no matter how loud or rich or connected they may be. Oliver's story isn't just about a soldier. It's about all of us. Because in our own ways, we're all on duty in life. You may not wear a uniform, but you might be. A grandparent raising a child the right way. A nurse dealing with angry patients. A cashier facing rude customers. A retiree standing firm on what's right while the world shifts around you. And when disrespect comes your way, as it eventually does, how will you respond? Isabella Moore didn't just misuse power. She misjudged silence. She thought quiet meant weak. But what she meant was something louder than anger, character. And here's the truth. Power that needs to shout is temporary. Power that stands in silence lasts forever. So here's our challenge for you. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you respect or someone you want to become, rate it from 1 to 10 in the comments below. Be honest, be thoughtful. We'd love to hear your reflection. And while you're at it, tap that like button, not for us, but for every unsung hero who keeps their dignity, no matter the pressure. Drop a comment. Have you ever been in a situation like this? Gonna react. Would you have handled it like Oliver, or would you have done something different? And don't forget, we're on a mission to reach 1,000 subscribers here at Guard Royals. If you believe the world needs more stories like this, real, respectful, and meaningful, hit that subscribe button right now. You won't just be supporting a channel, you'll be standing up for values that never go out of style. Because honor, patience, and integrity are never outdated. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And above all, thank you for remembering what truly matters.